right now on Indianapolis This Week. The end of the federal government shutdown.
We have a lot more work to do.
We talked to one Indiana senator credited with helping reach the compromise deal. And we ask, what does this mean for Indiana Republicans who opposed it? Plus, getting more officers on the streets to protect your safety. We explore the city's new plan to hire more police. And getting truly moved, we sit down with the artistic director of the Heartland Film Festival about the big week ahead.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
We begin this morning with the aftermath of the government shutdown. All federal offices, plus national parks and memorials, are open again after the House and Senate passed measures Wednesday to end the shutdown and raise the country's debt ceiling. Indiana Senator Joe Donnelly is getting credit for helping end the shutdown for his work as part of a bipartisan group of 14 senators. Now, I had a chance to speak with him after the vote about the message that he hopes members of Congress take away from the shutdown.
The folks who represent you have to worry less about their partisan political agendas and more about our nation and about our state. And all of the citizens of our great state and our country have to tell their representatives, look, use Hoosier common sense. Do what you would do in your own home. You compromise, you work together, you create success, you create opportunity. Every day we spent on this was a day we didn't spend creating more jobs in Indiana.
I also asked him about Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, whose 21-hour filibuster highlighted the buildup to the shutdown. In an interview with ABC News, Cruz says his party backed down too easily and that he will do anything he can to stop the new health care law from fully taking shape.
So you would do it again?
I would do anything, and I will continue to do anything I can to stop the train wreck that is Obamacare.
Will you rule out pushing to the brink of another shutdown?
John, I know you...
Or will you say you're not going to do that
John,
again?
I know you want to nail down all sorts of future tactical decisions. What I intend to do is continue standing with the American people to work to stop Obamacare because it isn't working. It's costing people's jobs.
He is not the voice for a number of very, very solid and very, very hardworking Republican senators like Susan Collins, like John McCain, like Mike Johans of Nebraska, like Mark Kirk of Illinois. These are people who I worked with as part of this process to come together to try to make sure that as a nation we were able to move forward, and who, as John McCain always says, put country first. And so I think they're the face of a large group of moderate Republicans, and we have a large group of moderate Democrats. And as I said, we're not Democrats or Republicans, we're Americans, and that's our obligation.
You can see that full Ted Cruz interview in just an hour from now on This Week with George Stephanopoulos here on RTV6. We now bring in our political insiders, Democrat Laura Beck and Abdul Hakim Shabazz, publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Let's start with the question. Joe Donnelly, did he just raise his prestige in the Senate over this issue of working with his bipartisan group of senators?
Yes, I do. I think he did. And I think that one of the really interesting things about this is think of what we would be seeing right now had Richard Murdoch won. And think of how he behaved when he talked about compromise. And so I think Joe Donnelly, in a very, very short time, is distinguishing himself in a very positive way. But I think what he also says for himself speaks true, is that Senator Cruz does not represent the Republicans that he's working with on this, but he's willing to cross party lines. He's willing to get the job done. And that's what we sent him there to do.
Do you believe that?
Actually, I'm just going to sound really weird. Yes, I think Joe Donnelly is part of the 14, the gang of 14. They're a moderate, reasonable senators. You know, Olympia Snow from Maine, Mark Kirk from my home state of Illinois. I mean, these are the folks that are going to make things happen. I also think it's interesting that Ted Cruz said in his interview with Jonathan Karl, that he will do anything, including he didn't rule out a government shutdown. Well, Mitch McConnell this week already put his foot down on that, saying there will be no government shutdown again. That is not going to happen. So I don't know if Ted Cruz and those guys just didn't get the memo that this fight is over and done with, but there will be no more government shutdown.
So while Mr. Cruz has the largest voice, or is presumably getting all his attention.
The loudest voice, I would say.
The loudest voice.
Yeah.
Does someone like a Joe Donnelly and the other bipartisan members of that group, does their prestige, do they really get to more attention because they're not yelling and screaming?
They do, because there's a saying, I think, in the political process, and Abdul may echo this from his time in Illinois state government, is that the sausage gets made, and sometimes you don't want to be in the room when the sausage gets made, but it gets made. And I think this is an example of how Senator Donnelly Donnelly is one of the sausage makers. He is in there. He is dealing. He is working together. And part of the Senate, I think, and Abdul, you may have some other opinions on this. I've never worked for a senator, but in my observation is it's how you get the deal done. It's how you seal deals. It's how you make it happen. And if Senator Donnelly is there, he's quietly doing it. We didn't have any idea that he was doing this all last week until this started coming out. So yes, your prestige does definitely rise up. He didn't need to be on the morning shows talking about what he was doing, because he was working trying to get it all done.
And I don't think any senator who voted for the shutdown deal, loses their conservative credentials. Dan Coates, senior senator from Indiana, he was actually dealing with the last shutdown back in the mid-90s. Dan voted to end the budget stalemate. He doesn't support the Affordable Care Act. I think this country needs to get back on the road for fiscal stability, but he knows a shutdown and put us on the path of default where we're not options. So I think both Indiana senators get kudos this week.
So let's take a look at to see how the Indiana delegation voted this time around. As you can see, 4 members voted for the resolution that ended the shutdown, including Republicans Susan Brooks and Todd Young, but 5 Republicans voted against it. We talked to Republican Dr. Larry Bouchon as the vote was about to happen about the blame being placed on the House GOP.
I think we have been unfairly labeled. I think that if you look at what we did before the shutdown, we passed 4 continuing resolutions with different proposals in there that, in my view, were compromises from our position of completely defunding the health care law. And the House, the Senate Democrats and the President rejected all of them. So I think, there's enough blame to go around.
Are the Republicans getting the short end of this all? They're getting blamed for the shutdown. They're getting blamed for taking us almost to the edge. Is that unfair to blame the GOP when Democrats as well were part of this process?
Absolutely not. It's not fair. And what I think was funny is we're watching the list of no's. It's, I'm kind of thinking, oh, geez, which one of those is going to take, Dan Burton's place? Because I feel like they're skating very, very close to going into Dan Burtondom with some of the things that they've been saying the last few weeks. I mean, these folks were absolutely willing for our nation's economy to default. And if it had defaulted, we would be having a very different conversation today.
Were they really doing that, or were they really trying to say, look, we want our agenda, and if you don't listen to us, there is potential? I mean, so was this a good strategy, Abdul, in any way?
As I told somebody the other day, I hate to say I told you so, but I kind of told you so.
So there's no redeeming value to this? I mean, there was nothing possible that could have come out of this?
No, there was no good come out of this. From early on, the Republicans never had a plan B. I would actually argue they never had a plan A.
Yeah.
And the fact that they didn't have a plan B, we saw this in some of the comments that were put out by representatives who I like and friends with personally, Marlon Sussman, Todd Rokita, just some of the missteps they'd made along the way shows that there was no organized plan, no strategy. And by the way, just to let Laura finish here, and they made this about the Affordable Care Act, but they should have left alone. The past 2 weeks rollout of the ACA have been a disaster. When Robert Gibbs, the president's former spokesperson, says people should be fired over this, that would have been a narrative for the past 2 weeks.
Larry, you are in PR. I mean, was that not a missed opportunity? When that rollout occurred, it has not been smooth at all, and that is just a factual truth.
But yeah, it has not been.
If the GOP had let it just go, we could be talking about every day for the past 18 days how bad this thing really is.
We absolutely could. And yes, as a PR person, you sometimes, when you have a bad day, you hope somebody puts out news that's worse than yours. And sometimes you're lucky and that happens. Sometimes you're lucky and it doesn't.
Or sometimes you get the House Republican caucus.
Right. But what I think about it, too, is I think that the reason why they couldn't do anything on it is it's emblematic of the civil war that's going on in the party right now. You've got the Tea Partiers who are out there threatening to primary people like a Susan Brooks, like a Todd Young, and that could be one of the reasons why they voted for the vote to end the government shutdown, is because they know that those districts could be a little bit more vulnerable. Plus, they are also looking at leadership positions.
2014, how does it look? We had a special election in New Jersey, which is a blue state, but they had a chance to fill it with a Republican. The Cory Booker, the Democrat won. So are we looking at 2014 in which maybe Democrats will hold on to the Senate?
I think a bigger race to actually pay attention to is a Virginia governor's race, because Virginia has always been sort of a very purple state these days. You got the Tea Party Republican versus Terry McAuliffe, a friend of Bill and Hillary Clinton. That to me is a much bigger. Also, that place is full of government workers too. So that is a bigger barometer forecast, I think, for 2014. But also remember, a day is a lifetime in politics.
The other thing though with 2014 though is that in Indiana we're going to have a little bit different climate, and it's very possible that the gay marriage referendum could be on the ballot.
Will anyone lose their seat seat because of what they vote, how they voted in this time around?
Unfortunately, because of the way the districts are drawn, I don't think so. Should they lose their seat? Absolutely. But because of the way those districts are drawn, I don't think so.
10 seconds. Sunday showdown. Colts, Broncos. You pick.
Oh, Colts.
I hope I'll
Absolutely.
be Broncos.
I'm
Jim
all
Irsay
Colts.
should have kept his hands off of Twitter.
You know,
stay up.
I'm all Colts.
Speaking of Twitter, stay up to date with our political insiders. You can follow them on Twitter and, of course, on our homepage, theindychannel.com. Indianapolis This Week continues right after the break. And coming up next, new police officers on the streets to keep you safe. We look at the city's new budget with money for more officers. We'll talk with the man in charge of the city's public safety department. 2014 city budget is a done deal. 80 more officers will join the ranks, but it's still not enough. Joining us now is Troy Riggs, the city's public safety director. He officially started in October 2012 and brings a lot of experience from other local government entities in Texas and Kentucky. So 80 officers, is that the beginning of the process?
It is the beginning. We're asking for additional officers. Chief Hyde and I have talked, and after evaluating over the last year, we believe that we need somewhere between 100 and 200 officers to really give some relief to our workforce and put us where we need to be a very proactive police department.
Now, it's 80 officers, but then it's also some civilians, right?
It is. So we're going to have 80 officers hired next year, 50 of those because we have found savings within our existing budget. There's going to be 30 additional that are given to us through additional funding through the budget. And then we are also going to hire 40 to 45 civilian employees to take the place of a lot of officers that are doing those jobs right now. All these positions that are going to be civilianized would have to be filled by a police officer. If not, what that means for citizens is that those officers in those positions now hit the streets immediately. They have immediate impact on the ranks, so it really takes our number up to about 120 officers on the street next year. And by hiring civilians instead of officers, we save about $2.5 to $3 million per year because of that, because civilians cost less than having a fully equipped and trained police officers.
Let's break that down. If we talk about 80 officers, when can we actually expect them on the street? Because you first have to get a recruit class, they have to be trained. I mean, you just don't throw people out on the street. So when do you really believe that those 80 will be on the beat?
Well, as soon as we hire the civilians, we have 10 positions open now. We'll open up 35
so you're hiring
next year.
Now?
We're hiring right now for civilian employees. As soon as those civilians are hired, those veteran officers that are currently in those positions will move back to the streets immediately. That will be the equivalent of right around 40. Then we're going to have a small class by the end of April or early May of probably about 30 officers that we will hire. It will take them about a year to fully get trained and be equipped and be on the streets, and then we'll start another class of about 50 in the fall.
Director, you have been all about efficiency and finding where there may be fat or where there may be things you can repurpose. But at some point, you also talked about that the city has to really, and we talk about the city, the people of Marion County, have to really start thinking about how do we fund these officers long term.
That is correct.
And that's not politically correct to talk about possibly taxing or some sort of fee structure.
Or looking at sustainability. And I want to make sure that taxpayers understand, I gave my word to them when I arrived here. I would not ask for additional officers until I knew there was a need and we're as being efficient as possible. And it's also important to point out that those 45 civilian employees that will be hired and those 50 officers are all within our existing budget. We have found the savings within our existing budget with a flat budget to do that next year. That's a tremendous accomplishment for our staff. The additional 30, new money. But right now it's one-time revenue, and I'm the individual who has to pay the bill in year 2 and 3 and 4, and I want to make sure that we have sustainable funding. It is not up to me to find that funding. It's up to the mayor, obviously, and the council. The mayor's been working very hard, and I'm very grateful to the mayor for his leadership and the council for allowing us to hire those additional 30 next year.
So are you done looking for savings? Have you reached that threshold, or is there still fat in the department?
There is always ways you can become more efficient and effective, and we will continue to do that. But we found some big savings this year. One thing that people may be surprised by is that after the bombing in Boston, we increased our security at all of our events. What citizens will be surprised to learn is that in each one of those events, we actually saved money in comparison to the year before. So we were more effective as an organization, but we were more efficient. We will continue to look at efficiencies, and we have administrative reviews weekly to ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent wisely.
You know, when people hear efficiency, they get a little scared because they think, well, does that mean we're going to affect quality of service? Because efficiency in some people's minds means we're going to cut back on services. So are we cutting back on services, or are we keeping the same level of service but adding more people. What are we doing here?
That's one of the reasons I always use the term efficient and effective. We will never decrease our effectiveness because we're trying for efficiencies. So I go back to the events after the Boston bombing and with our marathon and the 500. People saw visibly the increase in police personnel. But at the end of the day, we saved taxpayer dollars because we looked at staffing levels better. We made sure that we weren't paying overtime when we didn't need to pay overtime. And we just continually looked at our revenue stream. We continually looked at where that money was going out. And as a result, we provided very effective safety. We enhanced the safety and security of these events, and we saved taxpayer dollars.
We've seen a rash of shootings earlier in the week. What are we doing to sort of deal with that kind of gun violence that sort of just erupts on all parts of the city overnight? Are we putting in some strategies to deal with that?
We are. You know, earlier in the year, we had Chief Hite and his team get together and look at everything from truancy to reentry. And one of the things I think we've accomplished this year is you've seen the homicide rate. It's still higher than it was last year, but it's continually dropped as comparison to last year over the last few months. But we're looking at everything for truancy and reentry, and we're having a conversation community-wide, what we can do as a community to affect crime. The good news is most of our crime rates are down this year. Shootings are not dramatically up this year. What we are seeing is that bullets are landing in vital areas this year and people are dying as a result. It's a troublesome fact that we're seeing. We're seeing some younger people. But something that we have noticed here recently is that 75 to 80% of both victims of homicides and suspects of homicides have prior histories of violence against individuals. That's why we're focused so much on reentry.
Sir, 15 seconds left. Your highlight as you mark almost your one-year anniversary here with us at Indianapolis. Have a highlight?
I do have a highlight. I think it's the partnerships that we're seeing between the men and women of the Department of Public Safety and the community. That seems to be strengthening each and every day, and our new Department of Public Foundation is a perfect example of that.
Director, we thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
We hope that you'll come back again. A moviegoer's dream. Indy is the place to be this week as some of the best filmmakers are in the Circle City. Any Oscar contenders? We'll ask when Indianapolis This Week returns.
People will say things like, I don't know if I could do this. And my answer to them is, yes, you could. Mothers can do anything.
That's part of the trailer for Life According to Sam. The story of Sam Burns. He was diagnosed with progeria, a rare condition that puts his lifespan at around 13 years. It's a story of how he and his parents are living and working to find a cure for other children. It's just one of the many fantastic films chosen to be part of this year's Heartland Film Festival. And joining us now is Tim Irwin. He is the artistic director for the 22nd Annual Film Festival, which ends on Saturday in Indianapolis here in the Circle City. What an exciting time to have all these great movies in our very city.
It really is. It's fantastic. We have 134 films from 44 countries. We're expecting over 100 filmmakers this year alone, so it's really awesome.
And you really invited an entire genre of people. I know that Vanessa Hudgens from High School Musical, all the kids that love Disney movies, would love to see Vanessa Hudgens back in Indianapolis.
Yeah, so we had the world premiere of her new movie, Gimme Shelter, which opens, I think, in January, so we had a really early sneak peek of that. We had 2 screenings of it last Thursday for her opening night. Last night we gave her an award for our Pioneering Spirit Rising Star Award to kind of commend her for her work in the film. It's a really awesome film, and I can't wait for more people to be able to see it.
Another movie that people are talking about is the one called The Book Thief. What's that one about, The Book Thief?
Yeah, The Book Thief's based on the best-selling novel of the same name, and it has Liesl Memminger plays this young girl in 1940s Germany, and she loves storytelling and stories, but the times that she's living in are very difficult, and she's been adopted by a family. Her adoptive father's played by Jeffrey Rush, her mother by Emily Watson. Fantastic story. It's really well told on the big screen, and it's gonna close out the festival with a bang.
And these are big-name stars. We're talking about Jeffrey Rush and Emma Watson. We're not talking about some C-lister. These are big-time movies with big-time names.
These are big stars. Jeffrey's won an Oscar before. We've had 2 directors that have won Oscars before as well. Yeah, they're big people.
Is it harder to pick the movies because you're getting so many people that want to be in Indianapolis this week? Your website already says, sorry, we're closed. How difficult is it to pick the movies once you get all these submissions?
It is an intensive process. We started taking submissions March 1st. We had 1,521 that were submitted. It took us, I think, 4 months to narrow that down to the 134 that we're actually showing. I ruined about 50 people's lives over the summer by making them watch film after film after film, and it's all worthwhile. The fruit of our labor is happening right now, and it's really exciting.
A lot of good popcorn. What about some possible Oscar contenders? Because we're getting ready. I know it's only October, but the Oscars are just right around the corner. And last year we had a couple of films that premiered here in Indianapolis that made it that far.
Yeah, last year we had 3 short films that were nominated for Oscars. One of them actually won, Innocente, and the director is back here at Heartland again this year with the film Sean Fine. His film this year is Life According to Sam, so it's good to see him back. This year, yeah, I really hope so. I think we'll have some documentary features and maybe some short films that'll see Oscar gold come January, February.
And I'm sure we'll have you back in January so you can detail all the films being seen right in Indianapolis for the Heartland Film Festival. Tim Irwin, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much. The Heartland Film Festival runs through Saturday, October the 26th, with events planned throughout the city in the coming week. You can see that full schedule. Plus, get your tickets on their website. You can find a link to that in the Hot Button section of our homepage, theindychannel.com. Indianapolis This Week returns right after this. Peyton Manning returns to Lucas Oil Stadium today after all the hype, including turning the canal blue. It is finally game day. The Colts hosting Peyton and the Broncos. Game time, 8:30. Police remind you to be on the lookout for fake tickets if you're trying to buy one as you enter the stadium. You can also go online to our website, theindychannel.com, and see a gallery of Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck through the years. So go Colts today, and thank you for watching Indianapolis This Week.